Next up, we have Stephen Clark. Stephen is from Salt Lake City, Utah, and began working with the Utah Department of Transportation in 2013 and is currently the Avalanche Program Manager. Additionally, he is the chair of the Transportation Avalanche Research Pooled Fund and facilitates snow and avalanche research projects in the Wasatch Mountains. In addition to his UDOT responsibilities, he is an adjunct professor at the University of Utah in the Atmospheric Sciences Department and an instructor for the American Avalanche Institute. Stephen, welcome, and pass things over to you.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I was happy to present when I was approached about this to this group of people. So hopefully this is enlightening. Like Jeremy said, yeah, my name is Stephen Clark. I'm the chair, the current chair of the Transportation Avalanche Research Pool, along with the co-chair Tim Glassett from the Alaska Department of Transportation. We are really kind of tasked with running the monthly meetings and kind of facilitating the different project updates and project presentations that the TARP voting members receive. The Colorado Department of Transportation is the lead organization for the TARP pooled fund. So that means that the TARP organization is operating under the CDOT procurement and organizational kind of rule structure. David Reeves is a key component of helping that program run successfully. In addition to, because Ethan and Brian are both pretty intimately not familiar with the Colorado Department of Transportation financial and operations structure, they're also, even though they're not acting member kind of leaders of the organization, they're essential to keeping some of these projects running smoothly. So, yeah, next slide. So, the mission of the TARP program is to enhance cooperative interagency research that improves the safety and effectiveness of avalanche observations. That is a really kind of a nice synthesis of how the group got started. And I think it's kind of important to kind of tell that story. And going back to what Ethan said and the graphic about where are avalanches happening in the United States, and it really is it's fundamentally a Western United States problem, and it's even more niche than that. Not every Western state has a significant enough avalanche problem that they have full-time avalanche forecasting teams and active mitigation. So, we were all sort of aware that of what DOTs were operating avalanche programs, and we would occasionally meet at a conference every other year and talk about what was going on. But as these programs got more involved with more technology and really higher demand for the roadways, we all sort of felt the need that because we were this very niche group of people, we really had some very specific problems that really weren't being met with, they weren't really being met at all by the greater research community, or if they were being met by a vendor or a research group, it was not really up to the kind of mission critical standards that we really need for some of this equipment. So that's really how this pooled fund idea was born. And kind of moving into that, we kind of were able to develop a structure with the pooled fund and come up with a mission statement, come up with some organizational documents. And that all started back in 2016. So the pooled funds run on a 5-year cycle. We're now in the second 5-year cycle. And I think we've had some good success stories so far that I'll kind of highlight later. Next slide. So here's just a general overview of kind of the organizational structure of the TARP program. It's led. The lead state is the Colorado Department of Transportation. They're a voting member and they're a part of the technical advisory committee. The technical advisory committee is a group of people who are putting up a certain dollar amount of money on a yearly basis. We typically commit when we start the pooled fund in a 3-year period, and then the pooled funds have run for the 5-year period. So there are 6 members of the technical advisory committee. But we also recognize that because we are such a niche industry, that we wanted to sort of involve some of these other programs, even if their financial commitment didn't make them a voting member. So this general membership category. And And really the general members have the list has grown there during from TARP 1 to TARP 2. We now have Department of Transportation programs for all over the world. So Norway, New Zealand, and Canada, as well as many Western US DOTs. So um, we have monthly meetings. Projects can be voted for if a research group comes to us with a project idea. We typically have a project update presentation and then kind of discuss it amongst ourselves in a closed portion of the meeting, and then eventually vote on those projects. And then in addition to those general members, we've also been in this TARP 2 iteration of the fund. We've allowed for kind of third party members to come and sit in on some of this project presentation portions of the meeting to generally get an idea of what members are talking about. And those would be consultants or research groups, et cetera. And so we invite them in for that kind of open door portion of the meeting to just get an idea of what's going on. Next slide. So since 2016, in the TARP 1 and TARP 2, we've spent over $1.5 million on numerous research projects. TARP 1, we completed 9 research projects. And now in this TARP 2, we've got 2 projects completed so far, and then we've got 6 active projects. So we are pretty good about trying to get projects, really kind of assess the incoming projects, get them through the CDOT procurement process, and get them the work being completed as soon as possible. And the other part of this is some of these completed projects. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we often had these very niche needs for avalanche detection or avalanche mitigation that really we weren't being met by the greater technology available. And a large part of that, it was just that some of the return on investments for some of this technology is not great for some of these vendors. So it was hard for them to commit a bunch of money. So to kind of going into this niche area of work. So a great part about this TARP pooled fund is that we've seen some really nice tech transfer from research that's being done in the TARP projects, and then taking that into standalone companies that are now providing us services that we really need. So next slide. So I'll just kind of run through a couple of the highlights of firm projects that we have funded in years past. During TARP 1, kind of like Ethan mentioned, snow is one of the hardest natural substances on Earth to measure in any kind of accuracy, especially in real time. And so how that new snow falls on a slope is very important to the avalanche hazard. And so we worked with a research group at the University of Utah to develop and refine an instrument called the Differential Emissivity Imaging Distrometer. And basically, this instrument can measure on a flake-by-flake basis the density, type, and fall velocity of those, and how a storm is changing throughout time and space. And that was really influential for natural avalanche forecasting and direct action avalanches. Next slide. And so similar to what Brian mentioned, most of the TAC members are also part of a group called the American Avalanche Artillery Users Group of North America. So the group of people who are using artillery for avalanche mitigation. And like Brian mentioned, a lot of those programs are working to reduce their dependence on military artillery. And one of the initial, after some of these rack systems were installed, we realized, and the users realized, that there must be a better way to site these specific devices. And so we teamed up with a group from Montana State University to actually measure from a third-party perspective the radius of effect of some of these devices, and that will help us with our rack density planning and making sure we're putting those rack systems in places that are effective, and also having some overlap in case one of the systems doesn't work. You can go to the next slide. This is just sort of a graph of some of the outputs of that study. It shows the overpressure effects. There are some overpressure numbers that need to be achieved that the snowpack needs to experience to trigger avalanches, and that has a decrease in effectiveness the farther away you get from a certain device. And some of the devices are more directional in nature, and some are more omnidirectional. And so this study really gave us some good, solid data to work with for our planning purposes. And I think to date, this is one of the more effective and widely used outcomes of a TARP project. Next slide. In addition, like I mentioned, the tech transfer avalanche detection is a very important kind of space in the highway avalanche world. The Wyoming Department of Transportation and the Utah Department of Transportation got involved in a type of avalanche detection called infrasonic. This was back in the kind of early 2000s, and that system was really pretty revolutionary at the time. But again, because of the very niche use cases and the very small number of people who were implementing this technology, that being able to replicate and expand those networks really wasn't an option. So through the TARP project and Boise State, they worked on sort of renovating this form of avalanche detection using infrasound, and then being able to use commonly used equipment and data loggers and be able to expand these networks. So currently, this kind of spin-off company called Snowbound Solutions is producing this avalanche detection equipment and is being used in Utah and other state and ski areas around the West. Next slide. And then this is a nice, again, we do have kind of a pretty wide range of different projects. Again, because of the niche nature of our industry, we all as an organization have this question of how are we warning the traveling public, and what is the best way to warn the traveling public of avalanche hazards? So we funded a sort of a synthesis white paper project to sort of survey the different avalanche programs around the country and the world, what type of avalanche signage and warning messaging is being used, and to help offer some best practices and areas of improvement for a given program. And so that was a nice project as well. Next slide. This is just a kind of a quick brief overview of the current active projects. Again, we've got working with various consultants and research groups, trying to improve and refine some of the avalanche detection systems. Really trying to use some instrumentation and again, trying to refine this idea of how are explosives impacting the different snow layers, and what is the best way to site those devices, and looking at also other ways to how to stop that propagation. So instead of having the large avalanche release, how can we break up these avalanches into somewhat smaller pieces, and again preventing that debris from reaching the roadway. So it's again that's kind of a nice project that's being worked on in Colorado. And then this again idea like how do you where all these different DOTs are collecting large amounts of data from avalanche records, avalanche mitigation records. How can we better use that data? And now in this kind of new space of AI avalanche forecasting, how can that be best utilized? Next. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great work, Stephen. Yeah, I had a quick question before we get into the Q&A. I noticed that, and I've had the pleasure of attending a couple of the meetings and just listening in the background, but with some of the general members being transportation departments in other countries, how has that international perspective helped kind of shape the research that's occurred there at TARP? And have you been able to transfer any of those ideas that the other countries have already implemented here in the US?
I think it's really valuable. The culture of different governments and their perspective on risk management is can be somewhat enlightening. One thing I did wanted to mention too is we finish every meeting with a roundtable discussion, and people kind of go through how their winters are going, any kind of problems or issues than challenges that people are experiencing just in their day-to-day operations. And arguably, that's some of the most beneficial time during those meetings is some of that kind of conversational, anecdotal experience sharing. So yeah, having the international component is has been very valuable, I would say.
Great. Appreciate it.